May 3, 2007, Praia da Luz, Portugal. A quiet resort town. A warm evening. A family on holiday. 3 kids asleep. Parents dining 50 yards away. They checked every 20 minutes. Except that one time. 9:05 p.m., she was there. 10:00 p.m., she was gone. No broken window. No signs of struggle. No witnesses. Just an empty bed. An open shutter. A missing child. Madeleine McCann. The world watched. The story exploded. Was it a kidnap and a cover-up? Then came the false sightings. The suspect with a camper van. The USB under a dead dog. And now, a race against time. Because in just months, the suspect could walk free. And Madeleine McCann may never be found. A dead-end case. It has been more than 18 years since Madeleine McCann disappeared from her family's holiday apartment in Praia da Luz, Portugal. Since that night, May 3, 2007, 3 countries have launched investigations: Portugal, the UK, and Germany. Over 13 million has been spent. Millions more in media coverage, private campaigns, and international alerts. Yet to this day, Madeleine remains classified as missing. No body, no crime scene, no conviction. In the earliest days, her own parents, Jerry and Kate McCann, were named arguidos, official suspects, by Portuguese police. The reasoning was thin scent detection dogs, alerted to possible traces of a corpse in the apartment and in their rental car. Some observers criticized the McCann's demeanor in interviews, calling them too calm. But there was no physical evidence, no timeline, no confession. By 2008, the suspicions were dropped. The couple was never charged in any country. Then came Christian Brückner, the man German prosecutors called the prime suspect. In 2020, he lived near Praia da Luz. He had a long criminal record, including child abuse and the rape of a 72-year-old woman in the same town in 2005. He made a suspicious phone call near the resort on the very night Madeleine disappeared. Police discovered USB drives with child abuse images buried beneath the corpse of his dog. Still, even with over 20,000 pages of investigation files, no murder charges were filed. In October 2024, Brückner was cleared of any direct charges relating to Madeleine. He remains in prison for unrelated crimes and continues to deny all involvement. Today, the case is still open, but increasingly aimless. Operation Grange remains active, recently receiving renewed funding. German and Portuguese police have continued physical searches, including at the Barragem do Arrade Reservoir in 2023 and again in 2025. But each effort ends the same way: no new leads. No forensic breakthrough, no suspect in handcuffs. We have concrete evidence, not proof. German authorities admitted, a phrase that sums up the entire case. While the public eye has mostly fixated on the McCanns and Brückner, other theories still linger in the margins. An abduction by a stranger, a tragic accident covered up by a local, or a failure in surveillance that allowed something far simpler, but no less devastating to unfold. The case has become, in many ways, a symbol of broken process. Every possibility has been chased. Every clue dissected. Every lead investigated. And still, nothing. Madeleine's photo is no longer on every newspaper cover, but her face remains in the minds of millions. She is still missing. But is anything else missing too? Let's go back to that quiet night in May 2007, when the world was asleep, and a little girl vanished. What really happened inside apartment 5A? What was missed in those critical, early hours? And how many of those unanswered questions are because the investigation didn't ask the right ones soon enough? The night that changed everything. Before May 3, 2007, the McCanns were a regular British family on vacation. They lived in Rothley, Leicestershire, a quiet, middle-class town in England. Jerry McCann was a respected cardiologist. Kate McCann, his wife, worked as a general practitioner. By all accounts, they were educated, hardworking, and completely devoted to their children. Friends and neighbors described them as a kind, close, knit family. Nothing about them raised concern. Their eldest daughter, Madeleine Beth McCann, was born in 2003 after their long struggle with infertility. She was conceived through IVF, something both parents later shared publicly, and Kate often called her their miracle child. Madeleine had bright blue eyes, blonde hair, and a small, distinctive brown fleck in her right eye that made her instantly recognizable. At just 3 years old, she was known to be curious, affectionate, and protective of her younger twin siblings. In the days leading up to her disappearance, Madeleine asked her mother a question that would later haunt investigators. "Why didn't you come when Sean and I cried last night?" No one knew then how much weight that question carried. Sean and Amelie, the twins, were born in 2005. They were just 18 months old at the time of the incident. The McCanns had traveled to Praia da Luz, Portugal, in late April 2007 for a family holiday. They were joined by 7 adult friends and 8 children. The families stayed in adjacent apartments in the Ocean Club Resort. Every night, the adults dined at the resort's tapas bar, leaving their children asleep in their rooms and checking on them every 20 to 30 minutes. For that routine, the group would later become known in the media as the Tapas 7. It was a routine they'd followed throughout the trip, safe, familiar, until one night, it wasn't. Thursday, May 3, 2007, in apartment 5A, the McCann family was staying at the Ocean Club Resort in apartment 5A, a modest ground floor unit facing a narrow street. Inside the apartment, their 3 children were asleep. Their parents had joined sons for dinner at a tapas restaurant located about 55 meters away, close, but not within sight of their apartment. At around 8:30 p.m., the Tapas 7 began their meal. Like on previous nights, each couple had put their kids to bed and planned to take turns checking on them. The McCanns locked the front door, but left the sliding patio door at the back unlocked for easier access. It was a routine they had followed throughout the trip. Nothing had ever gone wrong before. At 9:05 p.m., Jerry left the restaurant for his scheduled check. He entered through the patio door and walked into the bedroom. All 3 children were still there, Madeleine asleep in her bed, and the twins resting beside her. As he returned, Jerry ran into a friend, Jess Wilkins, and the two chatted briefly on the street outside the apartment. They were just steps away from what would later be considered a critical moment. Around 9:15 p.m., Jane Tanner, another member of the group, got up to check on her own daughter. As she walked past apartment 5A, she spotted a man carrying a small child across the street. The man wore light-colored clothing, and the child had on pale pink pajamas and was barefoot. Jane didn't think much of it at the time. She assumed it was a father carrying his daughter home. What she didn't know was that this might have been the last time anyone ever saw Madeleine. Just before 9:30 p.m., Matthew Oldfield offered to check on the McCann kids during his own round. He entered the apartment, but didn't turn on the light. He later reported that he heard the twins breathing and assumed all was well. But crucially, he didn't look closely to confirm whether Madeleine was still in bed. At exactly 10:00 p.m., Kate McCann went to do her own check. She entered through the back patio and walked straight into the children's bedroom. The sight that met her was chilling. The window was wide open. The curtain was blowing in the breeze. Madeleine's bed was empty. Sean and Amelie were still sleeping, completely unaware. In shock, Kate ran back to the restaurant and screamed, "They've taken her! Someone's taken Madeleine!" Back at the apartment, the scene was chaotic. The open window, with no signs of forced entry. The unlocked patio door. No noise. No struggle. No witnesses. Whoever had taken Madeleine, if someone had, did so with terrifying silence and speed. Immediately, the group sounded the alarm. Friends, resort staff, and guests began combing through the property and surrounding area, calling Madeleine's name. Over 20 people searched every corner of the resort in the darkness, their flashlights slicing through the night air. Someone called the local police, the Policia Judiciaria. But it would be hours before a proper response came. By then, crucial time had been lost. That night marked the beginning of one of the most haunting child disappearances in modern history. A little girl gone without a sound. No clue, no trace. Just an open window, an empty bed, and the quiet unraveling of a family's world. The inconsistent evidence. From the very first night, the scene inside apartment 5A told a story, but not a clear one. There were no signs of forced entry. The window in Madeleine's bedroom, which Kate McCann claimed was open when she checked on the kids around 10 p.m., showed no evidence of being tampered with. No scratches, no broken locks. The curtains were blowing in the breeze, yes, but police later claimed the window may have simply been left ajar. It didn't point to a break-in. The back patio door had been left unlocked by the parents for easier access, as they rotated checking on their children from the nearby tapas restaurant. Inside, the room was tidy. Madeleine's favorite stuffed animal was neatly placed on her bed. Her sheets didn't look particularly disturbed, which led some investigators to question if she had even been in the bed that night. If an abduction occurred, it had left behind no struggle, no noise, no blood. Just absence. And already, the investigation was losing ground. One of the most critical failures was the way the scene was handled. Dozens of people, resort staff, friends, even curious guests, moved freely through the apartment in the minutes and hours after Madeleine was reported missing. Police arrived nearly 30 minutes after the first emergency call, around 10:40 to 11 p.m., and by then, any hope of preserving the integrity of the scene had vanished. The perimeter wasn't sealed. No proper logs were kept. Some officers didn't even collect the names of everyone present. What should have been a sterile, protected crime scene had already been compromised. British sniffer dogs, brought in weeks later, added an eerie layer to the mystery. One dog trained to detect cadaver scent reacted in the McCann's apartment, specifically behind the sofa, and again in the trunk of the family hired 3 weeks after the disappearance. Another dog, trained to detect traces of blood, also responded in those same locations. Forensic tests were conducted, but the DNA results were inconclusive. Mixed samples, degraded material, nothing that could hold up in court, nothing that could tie definitively to Madeleine. And, critically, these dogs were deployed far too late, long after potential evidence had been contaminated or lost entirely. The inconsistencies didn't stop there. As mentioned, among the group Tepas 7, the timelines of who checked on which child and when didn't quite line up. Matthew Oldfield said he peeked into the McCann apartment around 9:30 p.m., but didn't enter the room. He just glanced in and noticed the room was quiet. But that detail only raised more questions. If he didn't check closely, how could anyone be sure Madeleine was still there at that time? Then came Jane Tanner's testimony, one of the most controversial pieces of evidence in the case. Around 9:15 p.m., she claimed to have seen a man carrying a young child in pajamas near the McCann apartment. According to her, the child matched Madeleine's description. The man she described was roughly 5'7" to 5'11", slim build, with shaggy, collar-length dark brown hair. He was wearing a dark jacket, possibly black or navy, and light, colored trousers. What stood out to her was how he was holding the child, both arms wrapped around her body, cradling her horizontally, with her head resting on his shoulder. Her face wasn't visible. She was turned away from Jane, limp, barefoot, seemingly asleep. The pajamas were light pink, with faint floral or cartoon patterns, similar to what Madeleine had been wearing that night. Yep, strangely, Jerry McCann and another friend, Jess Wilkins, were standing nearby around that same time, and neither of them recalled seeing Jane pass or any man carrying a child. This cast immediate doubt on the timing and accuracy of her account. Later on, Jane modified elements of her story, including the direction the man had been walking. Despite these discrepancies, her sighting became a cornerstone of the initial abduction theory, especially in the eyes of British investigators. Years later, Jane reenacted the scene for a Crime Watch broadcast, and the resulting image, known as the Tanner sighting, became iconic despite its unresolved nature. Other small but puzzling details complicated the picture. Some reports say Madeleine always slept with a nightlight on, yet it was off that night. Who turned it off, and why? There were no strange footprints by the window or inside the room. No drag marks in the soil. No screams were heard, nothing. There were no security cameras at the entrance to the apartment. No CCTV footage of Madeleine leaving or being taken. No witness ever came forward to say they had seen her alive after 9 p.m. Beyond the McCanns and their dinner party, No one could place her with certainty during those crucial moments. Praia da Luz, in 2007, was not blanketed with surveillance like today. There was no automatic license plate recognition, no traffic cameras, no data trails to follow. And then there was the technology gap. No meaningful cell phone data was retrieved in those first days. No suspect vehicles were logged. With no digital breadcrumbs and a contaminated crime scene, investigators had little to go on. These early gaps became chasms. Evidence was thin. Timelines were blurry. Witness accounts conflicted. And as days turned into weeks, the trail grew colder. Whatever happened inside apartment 5A that night, it happened in silence. And that silence has echoed ever since. Theory 1. What if Madeleine wasn't abducted by a predator hiding in the shadows? From the earliest hours of the investigation, attention focused heavily on the idea of a targeted child abduction. It made for sensational headlines: a dark figure sneaking into a vacation apartment, carefully stealing away a 3-year-old girl. But there's another theory that never quite made the front pages. It didn't involve monsters. It didn't involve conspiracy. It just involved a mistake. Picture this: a thief, or perhaps two, wandering through the resort area late at night, looking for easy targets. The McCann's apartment was on the ground floor, patio door unlocked, lights low. It was a quiet corner in a busy tourist village. Maybe the perpetrator entered apartment 5A expecting to find cash, jewelry, or electronics, something easy to grab and go. But what they didn't expect was a child waking up. Madeleine may have stirred, sat up in bed, or spoken. Startled, the burglar panicked. Maybe they feared being identified. Maybe they were already on edge. In that moment, the choice was made to take her, hoping to avoid consequences. The abduction wasn't the plan. It was a reaction. This theory has roots in facts that got overlooked. Praia da Luz had a long-standing problem with nighttime burglaries, especially during the tourist season. In 2006 and 2007, at least a dozen break-ins were reported in and around the Ocean Club, many happening while guests slept. Some took place within just 100 feet of apartment 5A. The common thread: no forced entry, no alarms, just open windows, unlocked doors, and missing valuables. Except in this case, nothing was missing. That's one of the biggest criticisms of the burglary theory. If someone broke in to steal, why didn't they take anything? Why take a child? That's not how burglaries work. It's not unheard of. Crimes escalate when people are caught. And in that split second of fear, someone may have chosen the unthinkable, to take the child instead of risking exposure. Still, there's no solid evidence to back this up. The apartment showed no signs of forced entry. The window in Madeleine's room wasn't damaged. The back patio door had been left open by the McCanns themselves, allowing them to check on their children while dining nearby. That door, left unlocked, may have made it easy for someone to slip in unseen. Sniffer dogs brought in weeks later reacted to cadaver scent and blood in the apartment and the family's rental car, but DNA results were inconclusive, too mixed, and degraded to be of use in court. No fingerprints, no hair, no sign of a stranger, and no stolen items. Then there's Jane Tanner's testimony. At 9:15 p.m., she claimed to have seen a man carrying a child in pajamas, matching Madeleine's description. But Jerry McCann and a friend, Jez Wilkins, were reportedly standing nearby and saw no one. Jane's description shifted over time, especially the direction the man was walking, raising doubts about the sighting. And if it was a burglar, where did they go? There were no suspicious vehicles reported. No strange license plates. No getaway seen or heard. Praia da Luz didn't have CCTV or automatic license plate recognition in 2007. The trail, if there ever was one, vanished. But simplicity the same as implausibility. Many child disappearances around the world have been traced back to misunderstandings, accidents, and panic responses, not masterminded crimes. The tragedy isn't always in the intent. Sometimes, it's in chaos. Another variation is known as the accidental harm theory. According to this version, the thief didn't intend to harm anyone. But in the process of the burglary, something went wrong. Madeleine could have tripped, fallen, or been struck unintentionally, perhaps while the intruder was trying to escape. Realizing the child was injured, or worse, the burglar decided to cover up what had happened by removing the body. This theory is often connected to the cadaver scent picked up by British sniffer dogs in the apartment and the rental car. Still, forensic evidence was too degraded and inconclusive to confirm this narrative. Some investigators have pushed the idea of an inside information theft gone wrong. They believe the burglary might not have been random at all. Resort employees or someone familiar with the McCann's routines may have passed along key information. The family dined at the same restaurant each night, checking on their children in rotation. The patio door was left unlocked. If someone was watching and waiting for the right moment, this might have looked like an easy opportunity. But when Madeleine awoke, that plan unraveled. A less popular, but still discussed scenario is the mistaken identity theory. What if the intruder thought they were entering a different apartment or targeting a different child entirely? If the plan was abduction, but the wrong child was taken by mistake, it could explain the lack of clarity in motive and execution. Once the mistake was realized, the abductor may have tried to disappear completely. Finally, some speculate this wasn't just a simple burglary, but part of a larger criminal network. In this theory, a thief initially entered for valuables, but changed course after seeing a vulnerable child alone. This idea connects the burglary to broader crimes like human trafficking or child exploitation. While highly speculative, it's not without precedent in other international cases. These possibilities weren't completely ignored. In fact, Operation Grange, the British police investigation, did consider them seriously. DCI Andy Redwood of Scotland Yard once stated publicly that the case could be a criminal act gone wrong. Their review of the case between 2013 and 2014 uncovered at least 18 similar break-ins in the same area from 2004 to 2010. Many involving tourists asleep in their rented apartments, doors unlocked, and valuables stolen without any noise. A 2013 documentary offered new reconstructions based on this line of inquiry. They released 2E-fit sketches of men suspected of involvement in burglaries near the McCann's apartment. For the first time, the theory of a botched theft leading to Madeleine's disappearance was presented as a serious lead to the public. Following this, in 2014, British police even launched excavation efforts in open land areas near Praia da Luz, based on suspicions that a panicked thief may have hidden a body. No remains were found, but the scale of the operation highlighted how deeply authorities had begun to explore this version of events. Still, the burglary theory faces its share of criticism. There's no physical evidence, no signs of forced entry, no stolen items, no definitive forensic link to a thief. Jane Tanner's sighting remains contested, and some argue the theory is just too simple to explain a case that has endured for nearly 2 decades. But sometimes, the most tragic answer is also the most mundane. No networks, no monsters, just a crime of opportunity that spiraled into something far worse. Whether that's what really happened in apartment 5A that night, no one can say. But it remains a theory that refuses to disappear. Theory 2. After exploring the idea of a botched burglary, we now turn to something far less sinister, but no less devastating. What if Madeleine McCann didn't fall into the hands of a predator, but instead became the victim of a tragic, split-second mistake? Some independent investigators have asked a chilling question. What if this wasn't a crime of intent, but a moment of panic? This is where the drunk driver theory comes in. It doesn't rely on shadowy criminals or complex abduction plots. Instead, it proposes a heartbreaking possibility that Madeleine, perhaps confused after waking up alone, left her apartment to find her parents, and was struck by a vehicle. The driver, intoxicated or otherwise afraid of legal consequences, chose to cover it up rather than report the accident. The physical and circumstantial landscape supports the plausibility. The roads near apartment 5A weren't well lit. It was after 9:00 p.m., and Praia da Luz in 2007 lacked surveillance infrastructure. No CCTV. No traffic cameras. No automatic license plate readers. If someone had hit a child, there would be no digital trail. Like the burglary theory, the drunk driver theory grew out of what was missing. No signs of forced entry. Madeleine's bed was undisturbed. Her stuffed animal still in place. There were no screams, no struggle, no blood. The unlocked patio door offered a clear path for a child to wander out unnoticed. And then there was Jane Tanner's sighting. Around 9:15 p.m., she claimed to have seen a man carrying a child in pink pajamas. That child matched Madeleine's description. But neither Jerry McCann nor Jez Wilkins, both in the same vicinity, saw the man or Jane. This leads some to believe what she saw might have been real, but misunderstood. Perhaps a panicked driver, carrying the child's body, passed by without raising alarm. Supporters of the theory argue these events aren't unheard of. History shows many cases of drivers, especially those drunk or without valid licenses, fleeing the scene and disposing of a body out of fear. It's not always malevolence. Sometimes it's pure panic. This scenario also accounts for the eerie quiet of that night. No one heard a scream. No one saw Madeleine leave. No suspicious vehicle was noted in police logs. And still, no trace of her was ever found. Could a car have quietly come and gone, unnoticed? Could fear have silenced the truth? Yet the theory is plagued by its lack of evidence. No blood. No tire tracks. No marks on the road. No dented barriers. Not even disturbed soil near the apartment. For a fatal accident, the scene was oddly clean. Add to that, no witnesses ever came forward. No crash was reported. Not a single person described hearing a loud noise or seeing suspicious behavior near the road that night. One of the most persistent questions is whether Madeleine could have truly left the apartment alone. At just 3 years old, would she have been able to unlock the door, descend the steps, and walk into a dark street? Some say yes, it's not impossible. Others believe it unlikely, especially without waking her tour siblings or drawing attention. Law enforcement, for their part, never gave this theory serious weight. There was no door-to-door questioning about drunk drivers. No effort to inspect vehicles for signs of recent collisions. No forensic team scanning roads for micro-evidence. Even Gonçalo Amaral, the former lead Portuguese investigator, only vaguely floated the idea of an accidental death, never specifically a hit and run. In 2007, Praia da Luz was a small resort town without modern surveillance. No traffic cams, no CCTV, no LPR systems. Tracking a vehicle's movements was nearly impossible. Further complicating the issue is the local culture. In small southern European towns, it's not uncommon for people to avoid reporting minor infractions or accidents, especially when alcohol is involved. A local who struck a child while drunk may have feared legal consequences and chosen silence. Police never launched a targeted investigation for suspicious drivers or minor collisions on May 3, 2007. The initial focus zeroed in on the family and their acquaintances, neglecting outdoor leads. This misdirection consumed crucial time. There were also legal limits. If this theory is accurate, the statute of limitations for accidental manslaughter may have expired, reducing investigative incentive. Add to that the media narrative of a kidnapping, and the theory lacked the drama needed to capture public attention. Finally, the psychological barrier. The public often demands a villain, a predator, a monster. The drunk driver theory lacks that. It suggests a horrible act story, and perhaps that's why it never gained traction. Despite all of this, the theory still stands. It makes logical sense. It offers a realistic explanation for Madeleine's disappearance without the need for a criminal mastermind. It reflects how a simple mistake can spiral into tragedy. But it's also vague. It provides no suspect, no clear villain, no DNA, no witness, no license plate. In nearly 2 decades, there has been no corroborating evidence. Police haven't dismissed it entirely, but they've never pursued it seriously either. It remains a theory built more on what isn't than what is. And so, the drunk driver theory lingers. A plausible scenario. A missed opportunity. A human error wrapped in fear, not proven, not disproven. Just one more unanswered question in the silence. Theory 3. For the most focused path of this case, what if Madeleine's disappearance wasn't a cover-up or a random crime gone wrong? What if it was a targeted abduction, quiet, calculated, and cold? This theory isn't new. In fact, it was the very first line of thought Portuguese police explored in the hours after Madeleine went missing. A stranger crept in and took her. But like everything else in this case, that idea soon got lost in a storm of confusion, media speculation, and shifting suspicion. Yet, even after 18 years, the abduction theory refuses to disappear. Why? Because it's still one of the only explanations that fits the sheer absence of clues. No blood, nobody, no break-in, no confession. Just a child, gone without a trace. And if Madeleine was truly taken, then the next question is even harder to answer: by whom? And for what? It says Madeleine McCann was taken by someone who wanted her for reasons that have nothing to do with money, and everything to do with sexual depravity. A child predator. Praia da Luz, the quiet resort town on Portugal's southern coast, was supposed to be safe. A place where British families like the McCanns could vacation without fear. But to a predator, it was something else entirely: a playground of opportunity. Families arriving and leaving every week, children playing unsupervised, apartment doors left unlocked. It was chaos disguised as peace. Madeleine's apartment, 5A of the Ocean Club complex, had no security cameras, no gated entrance, no guards on patrol. Her bedroom was right up against a small pedestrian alleyway. The patio door had been left unlocked so her parents could check on her from the restaurant. To someone watching, this was a chance. A clear window. According to this theory, the person who took Madeleine didn't decide on a whim. They planned. They observed. They waited. And the man most frequently associated with this possibility is Christian Brückner. He was in Praia da Luz that night. He had a long criminal record: child sexual abuse, assault, and further disturbing crimes. He made a phone call from a burner phone near the Ocean Club at 7:32 p.m. He lived in a camper van and used multiple fake identities. In 2016, when German authorities searched an old property Brückner had once rented, they found more than 8,000 images and videos of child abuse. The files were hidden in a plastic bag beneath the corpse of his dog. If that doesn't say premeditation, nothing does. And yet, even with all this, Brückner has never been charged in connection with Madeleine. But the predator theory doesn't begin or end with him. There were others. Between 2004 and 2010, there were at least 9 other cases of children in the Algarve being assaulted in their bedrooms. Most occurred at night. The attacker often snuck into the room while parents were nearby. Victims described a man with foul body odor, brown or blonde hair, and broken English. Sometimes he spoke softly, sometimes not at all. The pattern is terrifying. Quiet entry, quick actions, vanishing without trace. One of those attacks happened in the same area as the McCann's apartment, and one child described the man trying to her to be quiet while holding her tightly. What makes this all the more frustrating is how little was done with these reports at the time. Many were brushed off. Some weren't linked together until years later. By then, whoever had done it was long gone. What makes this idea so disturbing is how well it fits with the facts. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows. The patio door was likely used since it had been left open. There were no sounds of struggle, no screaming, nothing to alert the parents or neighbors. Madeleine's bed didn't appear slept in. Her favorite stuffed animal was sitting untouched. Some believe she may have woken up, wandered into the living room, and been taken from there. A predator wouldn't need long. Just a few minutes. And he would know when to strike. Several reports from tourists and locals said they saw strange men lingering near the Ocean Club in the days before the abduction. Some of these men were described as taking pictures of children. One was seen outside the apartment. The biggest problem with this theory: there's no physical proof. No DNA. No fingerprints. No blood. No video footage of a man leaving with a child. No eyewitnesses who they saw Madeleine after 9:00 p.m. Jane Tanner's sighting of a man carrying a girl in pajamas at 9:15 p.m. is often cited. but her credibility has been questioned. The German police believe Brückner is responsible. They've said they have concrete evidence, but not enough to charge. What kind of person keeps child abuse material buried under a dead dog? What kind of man lives in a van and uses burner phones around children's resorts? What kind of person refuses to answer any questions about Madeleine's case? All fingers point to Brückner, and still nothing. There are other possible suspects too. Maintenance workers, temporary staff, people who had reason to be near the apartments without drawing suspicion. Some investigators believe the abductor could have been a resort employee, someone with inside knowledge, someone who knew which families had small children, which doors stayed unlocked, which routines stayed the same. The escape route was there. The alley behind 5A led to a dark path that opened onto the main road. A van to have been parked there. A child carried silently through the shadows. A minute or two, and it would be over. Police missteps in the first 48 hours gave this theory more room to breathe. The area wasn't sealed. Witnesses weren't properly questioned. Important leads, like the reports of strange men, were ignored. By the time international cooperation picked up years later, the trail was cold. Could Madeleine still be alive? Unfortunately, if this was a sex crime, the answer is almost certainly no. Not every disappearance comes from rage or perversion. Some are about profit. The child trafficking surrounding the Madeleine McCann case suggests that she wasn't taken by a killer, a predator, or a panic driver, but by an organized ring. A network that knew exactly what it was doing. A machine built for one thing, making money off stolen children. And Madeleine, with her white skin, blonde hair, and blue eyes, was a child who would fetch a price. From the start, there were signs this wasn't random. Praia da Luz was no backwater village. It was a magnet for European tourists, a place where families like the Cans came to relax. Kids ran free, doors were left unlocked, and strangers didn't raise eyebrows. For a trafficker, it was perfect. No cameras at the apartment entrance. No security guard posted by the pool. No lock on the patio door. Just a sleepy coastal resort of children from England, Germany, the Netherlands. And then there's the detail that never sat right with some former officers. There was no sign of struggle, no screams, no broken locks, no physical trace of a break-in. If Madeleine was taken, it wasn't a smash and grab. It was clean, professional, quiet. There were early witness reports, largely ignored in the chaos, of a man seen taking pictures of children at the Ocean Club pool days before Madeleine vanished. Some said he lingered too long. Others described him as having no children of his own. There were whispers, but nothing was followed up. Later, when trafficking was considered more seriously, these stories came back. They fit a pattern seen across Europe. In Romania, in Spain, in Greece, children had been taken in similar ways, scooped up from resorts, beaches, and crowded festivals. Sometimes they'd turn up again in another country under another name. Most of the time, they didn't. Child trafficking networks aren't like one-time abductors. They're organizations, gangs. Some pose as adoption agencies, others as care facilities. Some even work through corrupt foster systems. The product: children. Blonde, young, healthy. The demand comes from every corner. Wealthy couples wanting to skip legal adoption, criminal groups using kids for sex work, forced labor, or begging rings. And then there's the geography. Portugal in the 2000s was a gateway, with access to both Europe and North Africa. Traffickers used it as a transit point. The Algarve had dozens of narrow roads, hidden beaches, and nearby highways. From the Ocean Club, a child could be in Spain within 90 minutes. From there into France, Germany, or gone across the Mediterranean. Madeleine vanished sometime between 8:30 and 10 p.m. That's a wide window. A van with fake plates could have been waiting. A scout could have been watching from the shadows, knowing the McCanns went out every night, leaving the kids alone. The patio door was always left unlocked. It would have taken minutes. The McCanns were on the back foot from the beginning. They weren't believed. Then they were blamed. Then they were silenced. But all the while, the theory of an organized abduction sat beneath the surface. When Operation Grange started years later, they quietly explored the angle. British detectives looked into known trafficking networks. Interpol and Europol provided profiles. There were arrests across Europe. But Madeleine's name never showed up. Still, cases like Carlina White gave hope. She had been taken from a hospital in New York, raised by her abductor for 23 years. Found only when she began questioning her identity. There were others. Children discovered in Spain, Italy, even the US, living under fake names, often with people who claim to be adoptive parents. The logistics make it plausible. A team of 2 or 3, 1 scout, 1 driver, a clean house, to keep the child for a few hours. All in a night. It's been done before. And Madeleine, she fit the profile too perfectly. But there are holes. There always are. No body. No blood. No witness who saw the moment she was taken. No border report. No forged documents later linked to her. For a network to leave no trace, none, it would have to be flawless. And even professional traffickers make mistakes. Police responses didn't help. Portuguese authorities never issued an international Amber Alert. They didn't lock down the airports or set up checkpoints. They didn't check ferry schedules or fuel logs. Their priority was internal. Local. Small. They chased shadows in Praia da Luz, when the trail may have already crossed the border. In the first 48 hours, dozens of possible leads came in. Men seen loitering. Vans without license plates. Strangers asking strange questions. But the police were focused on Kate and Jerry. That tunnel vision cost them. Operation Grange, years later, tried to recover those leads. But time is the enemy in these cases. By then, most roads were cold. One of the hardest things about this theory is its cold efficiency. It's not messy. It's not emotional. It doesn't involve rage or revenge. It doesn't even guarantee harm. In some sick way, it pretends to offer a future. Just not the one the child was born into. That's what makes it harder to accept. Because it's organized evil, not chaotic. There were also known trafficking busts in Portugal. In the years following Madeleine's disappearance, Europol uncovered rings that moved children under fake adoption papers. Some worked with Eastern European contacts. Others through Africa. They moved fast. Across borders. Madeleine could have been one of them. But no one has come forward. No one has claimed her. And that's what haunts this theory. If she was taken for profit, where did she go? Who did she become? And why has no one seen her? Her face was everywhere. Her name. Her eyes. Some say that makes the theory less likely. Others say it proves how well it was executed. The silence may not mean it didn't happen. It may mean it was done perfectly. The trafficking theory lives in a space between hope and horror. It suggests Madeleine might be alive. That she could be out there, unaware of who she was. But it also suggests she was bought. Sold. A product on a black market. And as long as there are no answers, it can't be ruled out. That's the nightmare of this theory, but that she was taken. And kept. Until someone speaks, or something breaks, the theory stands. Not because it's proven, but because it explains what almost nothing else can, how a child can vanish, in silence, into the night, and leave no trace at all. It's not always about profit. It's not always about perversion. Sometimes, crimes are personal. And in a case where every plausible theory has been stretched thin, there remains one often whispered, but rarely pursued: what if someone took Madeleine not out of greed or desire, but out of anger? This theory doesn't see Madeleine as the primary target. It sees her as collateral, a symbol, a message, a small child caught in the emotional crossfire of an adult vendetta. Whether against her parents, against a system, or against a personal grudge unknown to the public, the motive here isn't money or lust. It's revenge. Unlike other theories of violent predators or human trafficking rings, this theory aligns with the eerily quiet scene at apartment 5A. No signs of forced entry. No broken locks. No loud commotion. If someone took Madeleine, they likely knew how to enter. The back patio door was left unlocked, intentionally, for convenience, and it was well known among the Tapas 7. But someone else might have been watching. Someone who had been planning. The abduction could have been clean. No panic. No hesitation. That's not behavior we typically associate with a stranger acting on impulse. That's something else. Maybe a person who had mapped it all out. Maybe someone who had been close. There were reports, unconfirmed but persistent, of a man seen lingering around the Ocean Club resort in the days before the disappearance. Someone watching the children play, sometimes near the pool. These reports never led to a name. But they never entirely disappeared either. Some employees also recalled odd behavior by guests or temporary staff, yet those accounts were lost in the frenzy that followed. It's not far-fetched to imagine a scenario where someone with inside knowledge, perhaps a former employee, a returning guest, or even someone who had a prior connection with the McCanns, used that knowledge to slip in and out unnoticed. Jane Tanner's sighting of a man carrying a small child at 9:15 p.m. has long been debated. But what stood out about her description was the calmness. The man didn't appear to be in a rush. He wasn't running. He wasn't hiding. That calm demeanor, if the sighting is credible, suggests someone who didn't fear being recognized. Could that mean the person wasn't a stranger to the resort? Or worse, wasn't a stranger to Madeleine? There was no ransom note, no demand, no communication. That alone differentiates this from the typical abduction for profit scenario. If money wasn't the motive, and the child was never found or heard from again, what was the point? Perhaps the act itself was the message. Both Gary and Kate McCann were medical professionals. That fact isn't irrelevant. Doctors often make difficult decisions, some of which don't sit well with patients or their families. While no evidence has surfaced pointing to any disgruntled patient or coworker, investigators never conducted an in-depth review of the McCanns' professional lives, or if they did, they kept it under wraps. Could someone have followed them to Portugal? Or realized only upon seeing them at the resort who they were? The theory assumes some prior contact, however small, that festered into resentment. In certain rare, but documented cases, individuals with deep psychological disorders target children not for who they are, but for who they represent. Madeleine may have been seen as a representation of something. The perfect child, of a perfect family. Some people, especially those who feel rejected by society or persecuted by institutions, may lash out in a symbolic act of destruction. Not to gain, not even to control, but to hurt. These motivations are nearly impossible to trace, especially if the perpetrator acts only once. No pattern, no history, just a ghost moving with purpose, then vanishing. The biggest issue: there's no proof, no note, no confession, no surveillance footage of a known associate. The police never identified any credible person with a known grudge against the McCanns. There were no death threats, no emails, no notes slipped under the door. It's also unclear why someone would go to such lengths just to punish a family, especially without ever taking credit. And if the act was driven by anger or revenge, wouldn't there be some trace of emotion left behind? Something. But this theory is strengthened by the very thing that weakens others' silence. A personal vendetta doesn't need public spectacle. In fact, it often avoids it. Early in the investigation, the Portuguese police focused intensely on Kate and Jerry McCann as suspects. That narrow focus meant other leads, especially subtle ones, were brushed aside. Potential personal conflicts weren't thoroughly explored. Resort staff weren't cross-referenced with past patients. No full profiling of potential, familiar threats was ever released. Moreover, records of temporary staff, vendors, and service workers at Ocean Club were poorly kept or lost. If someone who had access wanted to harm the McCanns indirectly, they may have found the perfect way in, through their daughter. There's overlap between this theory and others. Someone with a grudge could have partnered with, or sold information to, someone more dangerous. A trafficker, a predator, or a criminal group. Or they may have simply taken matters into their own hands, acting on a deeply personal impulse that no one around them suspected. What makes this theory so unsettling is that it leaves room for finality without resolution. If a disturbed individual took Madeleine out of personal hatred and then chose to disappear or more serious ending, the trail would end right there. No one to confess, no one to catch. Just a locked door with no key. The tragic void. After nearly 2 decades, the case of Madeleine McCann doesn't end in resolution. It ends in silence. What remains is not a solved mystery or a trial, but an aching absence that defies understanding. And within that silence, one theory, abduction, has always floated at the center, both the most intuitively accepted and the most frustratingly empty. There were moments of hope. A few days after Madeleine disappeared, a woman named Anna Stam, a shop assistant in Amsterdam, reported something strange. She saw a girl who looked like Madeleine, with a man and a woman whose features she remembered well enough for police to later produce sketches. The man had dark features and appeared to be in his late 30s. The woman had light brown hair and seemed to be in her 40s. The child asked a chilling question. "Can I see my mummy soon?" Stam reported it to Dutch police, who informed Portuguese authorities. It sparked headlines, but led nowhere. No names. No follow-up. No Madeleine. Years later, hope returned when police in Germany, investigating prime suspect Christian Brückner, conducted a 3-day search near a cliffside in Praia da Luz, the very area where he was said to have camped around the time Madeleine vanished. At first, they found nothing. But days later, bags were sent to Germany containing fabric fibers, fragments of bone. Though some believed the bones were animal remains, forensic teams pressed forward, searching for DNA, any link that could Brückner to Madeleine's disappearance. That search was not just about science. It was about urgency. Brückner may be released within months unless new charges are filed. German prosecutors have said, bluntly, "We have concrete evidence, not proof," and so, they literally and figuratively turning over every stone. This is where we are. One child, 5 major theories, and no resolution. The predator theory paints the image of a cold, calculated offender. Christian Brückner fits the profile. He has a criminal history of child abuse. He lived near the scene. He made a phone call minutes from apartment 5A on the night Madeleine disappeared. This theory has been the focus of Operation Grange, Scotland Yard, and German authorities for years. And yet, without DNA, without a body, without a confession, it's all circumstantial. The human trafficking theory sees Madeleine as a high-value target taken to be sold, adopted illegally, or exploited. The theory makes logistical sense. Praia da Luz is near highways, ports, and the border. Portugal has been cited as a known human trafficking transit country. But again, no sightings, no false papers discovered, no rescued child ever matched her description. And if such a highly professional network took her, how did they vanish without a trace? The personal revenge theory suggests someone had a grudge against the McCanns, not against Madeleine, but her parents. Maybe an old patient of Jerry's, a resentful former colleague, or someone harboring a warped ideology. This would explain the clean entry, the lack of a ransom demand, and the eerie silence that followed. But there is no identified suspect, no obvious enemy, and no evidence of prior threats. The drunk driver theory strips away conspiracy and intention. It proposes that Madeleine wandered out and was accidentally hit. The driver panicked, hit her body. It's terrifying because it's simple. And yet, it relies entirely on speculation. No damaged vehicle, no confession, no forensic signs that she ever left the apartment on her own. The burglary gone wrong theory adds another tragic possibility. Someone broke into apartment 5A intending to steal, not to harm. But something went wrong. But this theory struggles with the same problem as the others: no physical evidence, no sign of a struggle, no trace of a burglar, and no credible suspect ever emerged from local burglary rings. It remains a possibility. Just a silent one. Each of these theories is compelling in its own way. But none is complete. That's the cruelest part of this story, not knowing. Not just not finding her, but not even knowing what you're looking for anymore. A tragedy with no shape. A case file with no ending. Police efforts have ebbed and surged. The early Portuguese investigation was plagued by tunnel vision. By focusing heavily on the McCanns, valuable time and evidence were lost. Scotland Yard's Operation Grange brought new resources, but eventually became centered entirely around one suspect, Brückner. Theories outside this framework, trafficking, revenge, accident, were slowly deprioritized. Meanwhile, the public obsession fed itself. Every strange sighting became a headline. Every anonymous tip became a maybe. And with each theory floated, 100 more questions drowned the one that mattered. What happened to Madeleine? Even today, investigators sift through fabric scraps, bone fragments, data traces, looking for something that could finally close the void. But the absence remains. Because in the end, Madeleine McCann didn't just vanish. She was taken from a room with no struggle, no noise, no mess. Her favorite toy was still on the bed. Her siblings slept beside her. No one heard a scream. No one saw her leave. She was simply gone. Her parents still believe she's alive. That's their hope. That's their right. But what they, and the world, have truly been left with is not closure. It's a haunting question that time has refused to answer. And so, this case becomes more than just a criminal investigation. It becomes a study in how systems fail. How a world full of cameras, databases, border control, and satellites can still lose a child completely. How a family, armed with media, public sympathy, and global attention, can still spend 17 years without an answer. Madeleine McCann is not just a missing child. She is a symbol of the edge of what we can know. And that edge is terrifying. Because somewhere, someone knows. And until they speak, the world will continue to stand at the edge of that tragic void. The disappearance of Madeleine McCann is not just a case. It's a mirror reflecting everything that can go wrong in a high-stakes investigation. From the start, the theories have branched in completely different directions: a sexual predator stalking in silence, a human trafficking ring operating with military precision, a personal revenge masked in eerie calm, a tragic accident hidden by fear, or a burglary that spiraled into something darker. Each possibility exists in its own world. Each requires a different kind of perpetrator, a different kind of motive, a different sequence of events. And yet, none of them brings us closer to the one thing we really need: the truth. This case teaches us that sometimes, having too many roads leads to nowhere. That the presence of global media, experienced detectives, and public outrage still can't guarantee justice. That even in the modern age, with satellites and DNA databases, a child can disappear without a trace. But above all, it reminds us of the most haunting and unchanging question of all: where is Madeleine? Because no matter what theory you believe, no matter how logical, emotional, or terrifying it may be, every single one returns to the same point of pain: a little girl who should be here and isn't. And until we can answer that, nothing else really matters. The disappearance of Madeleine McCann is a tragedy that shook the world. But more than that, it exposed a terrifying weakness in how we deal with known threats. At the center of it all is a name that should have never slipped past the system: Christian Brückner. Brückner wasn't just a drifter. He wasn't some ghost living off the grid. He had a criminal record that stretched across borders and decades. Convicted of sexually abusing young girls. Caught with thousands of images of child abuse. Known for breaking into homes and living out of a van. He wasn't hiding. He was simply allowed to exist unnoticed, slipping between countries, falling through bureaucratic gaps, and evading lasting consequences. That's the terrifying part. Because if someone like Brückner, someone who fits the profile so precisely, can live freely near a resort full of children, make a suspicious phone call within minutes of a child vanishing, and still avoid charges for nearly 20 years, then we have to ask, what exactly are we waiting for? The lesson here is clear. We cannot afford to be reactive when it comes to child predators. Waiting until the evidence is perfect, waiting until the outrage is loud enough, or until an innocent life is already lost, that's how tragedies like Madeleine's happen. The systems meant to protect children must be faster, sharper, and more connected across borders. It's not just about punishing monsters after the fact. It's about recognizing them before they strike again. Brückner's past wasn't a mystery. It was ignored. And, in that silence, a little girl disappeared. We still don't know what happened to Madeleine. We don't know where she is, or even if she's alive. But we do know that someone like Brückner should never have had the chance. That's the bitter truth of this case. When justice moves too slowly, innocence pays the price,